Welcome to EKU Then and Now. I'm your host, Paul Blanchard, and I retired recently after a 35-year career as a faculty member and administrator at Eastern. This monthly series will focus on prominent EKU faculty, staff, and alumni who have had a meaningful involvement at Eastern during its history of more than 100 years. They will comment on what EKU has been like during its storied past, how it has changed, and what we might expect its future to hold. Our guest this month, Donna Masters, presently serves as a division director in the administrative division and member of the executive staff of the Kentucky Department of Criminal Justice Training. The majority of Donna's professional career was spent at Eastern Kentucky University, where she served under 4 presidents, worked directly for 2 presidents, and indirectly for 1. In addition to her role in the President's Office, she also served as an officer of the Board of Regents, director of the Office of Grants and Contracts at EKU. Obviously, these assignments have given her an inside look at high-level decision-making at EKU for more than 2 decades. Donna, thanks for agreeing to be interviewed on EKU Then and Now.
My pleasure.
Tell us how you came to EKU the first time.
Well, quite simply, I
needed a job, probably.
Yes, pure and simple, that's correct. Needed a job, applied, and obviously was hired. Initially in the business office of the university. And just as a little history, was in that office for about 2 years, and J.C. Powell's, at that time, administrative assistant, resigned, and I took that position. He was at that time Vice President for Administrative Affairs. Okay,
and at that time, and of course you and I came to EKU about the same time, in the early 70s, I guess. Obviously the most memorable EKU figure at that time was President Bob Martin. What are your recollections of Dr. Martin when you came to Eastern?
You know, I heard someone refer to Dr. Martin one time, and I think this is a perfect description of him. He was a benevolent dictator. I was frightened to death of him initially, and I recall that he didn't allow any cooking utensils in any of the dorms, of course, and certainly not in any of the offices. So that was a challenge for those of us who like to drink coffee. But we did find a way to circumvent that policy.
And what did you do?
Well, at that time, and I'm assuming it's still there, there was a vault in Dr. Powell's office. And so I put the coffee pot in the vault. And at that time, we kept liquor in the vault because of the DUI courses that were taught on campus, so he couldn't smell the coffee because of the liquor. So thankfully Dr. Powell drank a lot of coffee too, so that worked.
Well, back in those days there were some other memorable people, and I've jotted down here Polly Gorman, with whom you were very close. Yes. Tell us a little bit about Polly and some of the other people around the Coates building.
Polly was the administrative assistant to Dr. Martin at the time, and she and I became very close friends and remained friends even after she retired. And she would come back to the football games, and my husband would go to Frankfort and get her and her sister and bring them back to Richmond before the game. We'd go out to lunch, and then after the game we'd take them home. But perhaps, I'm sure that many folks now don't recall Polly, or maybe didn't even know her, but her son later became, Chris Gorman became Attorney General in Kentucky. Yeah. But I learned a great deal from her. She was quick-witted, sharp, and ran that office with an iron hand, but lovingly too.
Well, tell us a little bit about the Powell years and your role in that.
Well, you asked me earlier about Dr. Martin. I'm going to go back to that if I may.
Sure.
Some of the few things that I recall about him, and again, I use that term benevolent dictator. He was a very forceful person, as you know. But in addition to when Paulie would go on vacation, I would go in the office and work for him. And at that time, not so much now, but in those days, I'm sure you recall that we had a bitter rivalry with Morehead State University, especially in the sports field. And while Dr. Martin always tried to be cool about the situation, he was adamant that EKU win and made no secret of that. But anyway, he and Dr. Dorn, who was there at the time, were somewhat rivals, I guess. Early on, of course, when I would go into that office and work, I had no idea about that because I was a newbie there. So I recall, and I've told you this before, but for the audience's purposes, Paulie was on vacation and I was in there working, and Dr. Martin asked me to place a call to Dr. Dorn. And so I called the office, and Carol, who was the secretary and doctor in the president's office at Morehead, answered the phone, and I told her who I was and that Dr. Martin wanted to speak with Dr. Dorn. So it seemed like an eternity went on, and I heard nothing, so I said, hello, and she said, hello, and I said, well, we're holding for Dr. Dorn, and she said, oh, no, Dr. Martin always gets on before Dr. Dorn. And I said, well, perhaps that's been the case in the past, but it's not going to be today, because I'm not going to go in and tell Dr. Martin that he has to get on the phone before Dr. Dorn. He asked me to do this, and I've never done this before, and we're going to sit here and wait for Dr. Dorn. Well, Dr. Dorn got on the line, and I transferred him to Dr. Martin, and they talked, and then after they talked, Dr. Martin called me into the office. And he always called me for whatever reason, and I never knew why, Miss Red, and I never knew why. Anyway, he said, Miss Red, how in the blank did you get Dr. Dorn on the telephone? So, and actually, I don't even think he quite said it like that, but I won't say what he said for your audience. But anyway, I just said, well, I wouldn't put the call through to you until he was on the phone. So from that day forward, I was in Dr. Martin's camp.
Yeah, that's right.
It didn't matter what I did. He recalled that I got Dr. Dorn on the phone for him. But at that time, when you talk about importance in Frankfort, I recall vividly that Dr. Martin had a telephone on his desk, and he pushed a button, and he was in the governor's office in Frankfort. So he had that kind of connection to Frankfort, which certainly benefited this institution.
Oh, absolutely.
And still does to this day.
I never heard that before.
Yeah, and I always found that amazing. And whenever the phone rang, that button would light up, and we would know who should answer that phone and who shouldn't.